What's up, everybody? Welcome y bienvenidos a Narcos, the after show here on AFTERBUZZ TV. My name is Ashley. I'm so excited to be breaking down episodes 7 and 8 of season 2. We've got bombs, we've got betrayal, and we've got an epic trip to Germany. All that and much more right after this.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Time it is. Welcome everybody to the Narcos AFTERBUZZ show here on AFTERBUZZ TV. We're so excited to be joining you here for another episode, breaking down episodes 7 and 8 of season 2. We're almost at the end, man. I'm Ashley, your host today. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Ashley_Chatman, and I'm not alone.
You're
today,
not. Hey.
I have the very beautiful and lovely
Oh, thank you.
Miaira
It's nice to join you here today. I'm Miaira Jennings. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Miaira Jennings and youtube.com/Miaira Jennings TV.
And the ladies are taking over.
We are, yes. It'll be a good one.
Who run the world? Girls, no, I'm just playing. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. But thank you all to everybody who's joining us tonight and watching. We really appreciate you tuning in to discuss and break down these episodes. So feel free to leave a comment. You can also subscribe if you're listening to us on podcasts on iTunes. Give us your feedback and let us know what you liked about the show, what you like about the episode so far, and if you have any predictions or expectations for the rest of season 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with that said, let's just dive right in. So, okay, we are starting with episode 7, which is Deutschland.
Yes.
93, if I'm pronouncing it right. I knew my little German on there. And Deutschland is actually Germany in German. And I don't know exactly what the 93 represents, but there is a Deutschland 83, which was like an 8-part television series that was in Germany during the late, mid, or early 90s. And it was about espionage, a spy going from West Germany to East Germany, and political corruption and all that fun stuff. So I don't know if that was kind of
very fitting.
A nod, to the show.
Absolutely.
And
Probably.
Since Germany is kind of a pretty good theme of where we are in this episode, I thought it was really fitting. So I really like how we start off with this episode. Just this very casual scene with this everyday family getting ready for school, work, going on about their lives. And we hear this bomb explosion go off. We pretty much know or can expect who the culprit of that is. And the little boy makes a comment like, oh, that was a loud one this time. So I thought it was a great opening scene for the show because we've spoken so much on this season with the hunt for Pablo. And this has been all about Pablo, trying to get Pablo. And we haven't really dived into others' perspectives and seeing how this has affected everyday people who are living in Colombia and how this terror, how this violence is become commonplace for so many of these innocent civilians. And, seeing that opening scene, of course, because I'm just very analytical, like when they bring in characters, I'm like, it has to be for a reason. And so I'm wondering, like, are we going to see
what's
this
coming
again?
next?
Like, what's happening? What's coming? And unfortunately, that is the reality for so many people living in Medellín and Colombia at that time, especially with this war that's now ensued between Los Pepes and Pablo and the Colombian government. So I guess what were your initial thoughts of that scene? Did you have any expectations about like how the episode was going to go based off that?
No, I totally agree with you. I love that they put that scene in because, like you said, we've seen the perspectives of Pablo and his family. We've seen, Murphy and Peña, but we haven't really seen the civilians and the people who are just caught in the middle. So yeah, that was very profound. And of course, it ends up, turning out to be where the daughter loses her life. And it's just this huge mess and really a big turning point as far as the people's perspective of Pablo at this point, because maybe he's not their savior anymore. Maybe, they are changing their perception. So it was definitely very profound.
Yeah, and I think that was a complaint that I've heard a lot of commentators talk about this particular season is that we know the story of Pablo Escobar.
Right.
It's been told time and time again. And what they really would have liked to have seen in this season a little bit more of is just diving into other stories, other victims. We saw we saw little vignettes of stories with the young man getting on the plane,
right?
Sort of like seeing all these different stories. Exactly. So like seeing all these different stories, hearing about other people's lives that were impacted by the drug cartel, either directly or indirectly, and sort of seeing just like how this has affected so many different people, so many different aspects of the country, of the world. So I think it was refreshing to kind of get a break from Pablo in a sense, even if it was just for a few minutes. And then, yes, like we said, we'll come back to it towards the end, but it does come full circle, and we do sort of get hit in the face yet again, you know, with that devastation and destruction that happens. So ending off episode 6, we have, you know, Pablo and his family have, you know, been forced to move to another hideout, and he finally realizes, okay, Carlos was right. I need to move my family out of Colombia because they're not safe, and I can't be the man that I need to be in order to fight this with them here. Right. So they have this very touching departure with each other, which I've said this a lot in this season, you know, so sounding like a broken record, but I really like how in this season they're trying to show a lot of humanizing aspects of Pablo. Right. He's not towards the end just this vicious monster who we're like, yeah, kill him, you know. Everybody's in the street like, grab the pitchforks and like, let's find him. It's a struggle. It's a wrestle. Absolutely. To justify taking this man's life, because on the flip side, he is this seemingly loving father and caring husband who just adores his family and just wants them to have the very best life that they can have. So seeing that departure, it was tough for me to watch it because there's all these, you know, unspoken words and like promises and stuff that they know that they can't keep. So did you have any thoughts about those scenes?
I just love, first of all, Tata is one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite. I love the conversation between Pablo and his mother, or I'm sorry, Pablo and Carlos, when they're discussing, you know, whether or not he should get the family out of Colombia. And they're just talking about Tata, and Carlos is like, look, she's terrified and you don't even see it. But Pablo's like, she's stronger than you think. And it's such an interesting conversation when we talk about Tata, because we see both sides, right? We see her scared for her children, most of all, for their future. Are they going to be able to do this forever? But we also see her very strong and very confident in Pablo's decisions. So it goes both ways, and it was touching that they finally did decide to part ways and get the family to safety. But at the same time, a part of me understands why she would want to stay there, why Pablo would want them close, even though it's so dangerous, you know? Yeah. So it's very interesting.
Do you think that they actually thought that they would actually see each other again? Do you think that was something that they fully believed, or do you think it was just them sort of saying it to...
I think it was more... I totally got that vibe at first, especially, and I'm sure we'll get to it, but as we got into the episode, in episode 8, I think Pablo was maybe a little bit more worried than we've seen in the past. You know, a little bit more cautious, a little bit more worried about the future. So I don't know, but it was a hard one. A definitely a hard separation.
Yeah, and we've had similar scenes like this in this season, and I think that in the back of their minds, they kind of knew, like, okay, our time together is narrowing down. Right. But I think that they were just trying to show face, and I also think that maybe in the back of Pablo's mind, he actually really did think that he could finagle his way out of it. He's done it so many times before. We think about the span of his history being in the drug cartel. It was almost 2 decades. So he's been in situation after situation where he's had to think on his feet, and he's actually come out on top in some way. Things just have kind of worked out for him. So I think maybe in the back of his mind, he probably thought, like, okay, I can get out of this. And I think maybe Tata trusted that he might figure out something, because that's just what he does. But ultimately, I think that they kind of knew in their hearts that this would probably be the last time that they would ever see each other
definitely
again.
And it's crazy because I think if it weren't for the Pepes situation, they might have had a better chance.
Do you?
I really do, because I think the Pepes really put more pressure on them.
True.
And probably placed a lot more fear in Pablo Escobar's mind, because up until then, I don't think he was as worried that people would get so close to him and his family. I think he felt a little more secure. And now that these guys are killing people all over the city, leaving the signs, he's worried. He doesn't want to take that chance.
Yeah, and then speaking of, so we do have the Los Pepes still raining havoc and terror in Colombia, taking out his sicarios, taking out a lot of the people that are within his organization left and right, and creating what Peña says is like Colombian folk art.
Right.
So the way they dress them up and set them up, it speaks to like the callousness and like viciousness of the Los Pepes, and so you kind of can't really root for them, you know. No. It's one of those things where, okay, yes, Pablo, he's a bad guy and he's done a lot of horrible things, and so they're fighting against that. Okay, fine, I give you that. But at the same time, it's like, are you really that much better, you know? Which is how they're going about taking these people out one by one. And we see Fernando Duque, his lawyer, Pablo's lawyer, being caught in the middle of it. And it's so interesting. I've been kind of on the fence. Like, I don't really know how to feel, or I didn't know how to feel about his character for seasons 1 and 2. He just always kind of seemed a little bit more on the arrogant side. Like, I work with Pablo and I have a little bit of power, and I know I have some connections and I can talk to people. He kind of felt like he seemed untouchable in a sense.
Yeah, I think things hit him pretty hard in these last two episodes. He was not expecting that. I don't think he was very wise in the way he went about business and just conversing with people as far as Pablo was concerned. And he just really put himself in a bad situation. Regardless, the Los Pepes would have found him anyway, probably. But man, that was definitely a rough exit for him.
No, exactly. And it just made me think about it too. For a lot of the people who are close to Pablo and who Pablo relied on to just get stuff done or to make things happen, make deals happen, like now we're really seeing a turning point where everybody's questioning, is it worth it for me to stay? Is Pablo going to be able to live up to his promises anymore? You know, everybody is now like going back to the drawing board and saying, okay, I need to figure out my situation.
Absolutely.
And so with Fernando Duque, it was humanizing or at least in those scenes with him in this episode, we got to see him a little bit more on the like humanizing side, where, you know, he has his son, he has his ex-wife. He's very scared. He's extremely terrified. And now it's the untouchables who are now being flipped, and they're in the position where, oh my gosh, people can get to us. This is a scary situation to be in. Yeah. And so it's really heart-wrenching, you know, to see, you know, in his interactions with his son. I mean, he probably just started off as just, you know, an average, you know, kind of like blue-collar guy, white-collar guy who just was a lawyer in Colombia and was just trying to provide for his family, and he just got caught up, like you said, in the wrong, you know, got at the wrong place at the wrong time, and now it's all falling back on him, and it's all crashing and crumbling on them. So we're now like seeing the repercussions really hit the people in his organization who have been, you know, kind of like, I'm untouchable, a little bit more on the arrogant side, which is interesting. Yeah,
I just think they never expected, at least not so soon. I think they just didn't expect the downfall to hit them so hard and so quick, because we see them kind of scrambling. Yeah. I think this is the least prepared we've seen Pablo's crew so far. I agree. So, yeah, they're definitely trying to figure out what to do next. They were not prepared for all this.
Very true. And so, okay, we have Tata and the family trying to get out of Colombia. We know Gaviria and the DEA are still trailing them. They know that they're trying to leave the country. And so I was a little on the fence about this as well, because there was this, you know, they're in an effort to really put pressure on Pablo, to really shake him up and to get him, I guess, to be more irrational and make a really
to catch him
move.
Slipping.
Yeah, to catch him slipping. They try to prevent them from going into Germany, into to Deutschland. So they have Murphy tail them, and it's kind of murky on how he was able to pull this off. He was just like, oh, they have a lot of money on them.
Right, yeah.
I don't know if that would be enough to, you know.
Probably not in real life, but I was just thinking of any other excuse that may have worked with such a short time period. I guess he figured it out, but man, I was really upset about that. Yeah. I really wanted them to get through, and I just, oh man, I honestly don't know if that was a good decision, because a part of me feels like Pablo, as long as he knew his family was safe, maybe he would surrender. I don't know. I feel like he was maybe at that point. Regardless, he wants his respect, and, you know, he's built this pride and all of that. But that set aside, he wants his family safe, and they just sparked another flame. Like, they made everything worse. So I don't know what to say about that situation.
Well, I think that was their intention. I think they wanted to spark a flame.
But I think it's in a bad way.
Yeah, of course, of course. I mean, you have to think about, this is a man who, his family, okay, yes, they knew what he was doing. But, you know, he has 2 innocent children.
Right.
Who didn't ask to be put into this
Absolutely.
situation. And regardless of whether or not his mom and his wife were complicit, they didn't deal drugs.
Right.
They weren't in the drug trade. So it's essentially keeping them in Colombia in a situation where they can be targeted by this militia group who has no moral line. You know, they definitely want to kill his family. So it's like, okay, in a effort of us trying to be good and do good and be the good guys, like, are we really making the right decisions? So it's like, this was a really great episode to kind of show people's moral gray code being
Absolutely,
like,
and just trying to figure out what is worth sacrificing
exactly
in this quest. What is really worth sacrificing?
Yeah.
And I guess that's a sacrifice they were willing to make, is his family, his innocent children.
Yeah. Which was interesting to see, you know, the government, too, kind of struggle with that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Gaviria was like, whatever we need to do to make it happen, you know. But I think that the people's moral compass got the better of them, or at least on the side of the Colombian government and the DEA.
Right.
Well, except for Chuilo, who was the one who ended up giving Fernando Duque to
Right.
Pepes. But we're seeing that on all different sides. We're seeing how people are really starting to question, like, okay, at what cost is this really worth it? And what's going to be the repercussions? And then especially for Colombia, you know, you have everybody watching this too. It's not just, oh, this is going on behind the scenes and nobody's looking. No, people are hearing about this in the news, they're reading about it, they're talking about it. So every move that you make, regardless of like how vicious it is, you know, you also have to appeal to the humanistic side of everybody else that's watching it. If you want to get reelected, if you want people to support you. So it's just interesting how all of this is going down, and they're still trying to figure out like what they're going to do with the family. So with the family, the whole Germany jump basically gets blocked by Murphy. And Tata realizes
Major
it.
fail.
You know, major fail. She realizes it. She recognizes Murphy, you know, has been following her and is basically kind of like, I hope you got what you wanted. You know, like, thank you. I'm just a mother who's trying to protect my children and get my family out of harm's way. Thank you very much for ruining that.
Right.
So he kind of goes through his motions and his moments. And so we finally end with Gaviria making the decision to put his family essentially in protective custody.
Right.
Because the Attorney General, he's still on. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on just what you think about the Attorney General in this show so far, and just where you think his role is going to lead as far as like with Pablo and any other thoughts, I guess, on that whole situation.
Yeah, so he's really been the only one who has been, I guess, willing to entertain the idea of negotiations, right? At first, I thought this was a good idea because who wouldn't just want the violence to stop? Right? And I feel like Gaviria has been, you know, I don't want to say selfish in his actions, but when you've been beaten so many times by Pablo publicly, I can understand why he wants to make such a big statement. Yeah. Even when they're discussing, I don't remember who says it, they're like, at the end of this, we want the Colombian government to be the one standing over Pablo. Yeah. So they want to get him at the end of the day. You know, with the Attorney General, at this point, I just feel like it was more convenience, maybe saving himself, because I feel like we're way past the point of negotiations. Gaviria makes it very clear that he's against anyone who goes against them. So if you're up for negotiations with Pablo and his crew, you don't have Colombia's best interest at heart. Yeah. That's his stance right now. I really can't say who is making the better decisions at this point. I feel like we're just stuck in a rut, and it's either going to end with obviously it's going to end with Pablo dead or more destruction, because they've already passed the point of negotiations. They've passed the point where they could peacefully end things. There's just nothing good coming of anything at this point.
Speaking on that line, you know, we end this episode with a pivotal crux with now there's more violence that ensues.
Yeah.
So bringing it back to the opening scene with the little girl, she's on her way to school and then the bomb goes off, which was one of like the last, I think, major terrorist attacks, if you want to call it that Pablo made against the Colombian government. It was right near the palace, not near the Palace of Justice, but very close to the capital of Colombia. So a lot of children were in that area. A lot of children were killed. And he had conceded in interviews, or people had basically spoke on his behalf and said that he wasn't responsible for that bombing. But I think it's very clear that he was. It was kind of like the last little cry, his last little attempt to try and reinforce that he's Pablo Escobar, and that if he wants something, he will do anything that he can to get it. But we are seeing the power crumbling. We are seeing his entire empire crumbling. And we're seeing even more and more the negotiations are just it's not possible.
Right.
Like, you have crossed so many lines, and you've just made it impossible for anybody to try and reason with you. So you need to die.
Yeah.
So that's how we end with episode 7. So going straight into episode 8, which is Exit El Patron, which is the boss, basically. Yeah. So this was a really interesting episode. I liked it because there wasn't a lot of action in it, but we got a lot of great information, and there was a lot of great, I think, character and scene development that went on, specifically with Limon. I really am like trying to figure out, like, what is his motivation behind staying with Pablo, and not to jump too far ahead.
Right.
But we're seeing now so many people jump ship. And so that was kind of like the theme for me for episode 8. Just how people are really starting to figure out, like, okay, this is not a good idea to be associated with Pablo anymore. If they're not giving him up specifically, they're giving other people up in his organization who can eventually lead to him.
Only a matter of time.
Yeah. So I guess, what were your overall thoughts or impressions of episode 8?
You know what? Just talking about Limon for a second, it's crazy because when we first started the season, we were introduced to his character. I was like, man, this is such a good guy. Like, he doesn't know what he's getting into. And now it's safe to say he knows exactly what he's in with. Man, the development of his character from when we were introduced to him till now is just completely different. I mean, I still had a little spark of faith in him when I thought that he was really working with Maritza, and you know, before we figured out that was just his plan, and which that very well could have been his way out. You know, they could have turned Pablo in that way, and I guess no one would have known it was him. I don't know. They could have figured it out, but at this point, I would say Limon is so loyal. Yeah. He is so trustworthy. Like, Pablo can't go wrong with him. Right. I think out of anyone, I could honestly say he probably wouldn't snitch on anyone if they caught him and were torturing him. Like, he just seems like that real ride or die right-hand man. Yeah. And I feel like, as opposed to Quica can be shaken up. Yeah. We've seen him. He's a hothead, and he is scared of a lot of things, regardless of his tough guy exterior. So it's interesting to see the juxtaposition of those two characters for sure. Yeah. But man, Limon has come a long way.
No, definitely. I agree. And I think it's interesting how supportive and loyal he is of Pablo, especially because he came into this season kind of late in the game, you know? Yeah. It wasn't like we were journeying with him all of season 1 and then all of season 2. To us, at least as an audience, he's very new to the crew, very new to the group. And whether that was the case in real life, it's still kind of irrelevant, because it's somebody who, you know, you look at these people who are in his organizations and you think, okay, great, they had money, they had respect, they had power. Right. But it was really Pablo who had all of those things. Take him aside and they are just ordinary, average Joe people, right? And especially for Limon, like, I wonder how much he was able to enjoy the lavishness, the money, you know, all of the perks of being in this infamous drug cartel. Was it that really made him more loyal and just more committed to Pablo, or was it something else? Was it just built in his nature? Because we see it now, and I think we will see it for the last couple episodes, just how committed he is to Pablo and just being there for him in any way possible when he really has no reason to be. But we digress. We'll get into Limon a little bit later in the season. But then speaking on La Quica, so we have now intel from the DEA that leads us to basically figure out that Pablo is hatching this plan to launch an attack against Los Pepes at Monte Casino. So we get that intel from DEA, and so they want to try and catch Pablo. We end up with them basically catching Blackie, which we find out, you know, his family was mercilessly killed by Los Pepes. And so Blackie, and it was such a great scene too. I love how with this whole demise, they really have these nuggets, these gold, just full rich scenes with these characters who are just BSing it the whole way. And it's just kind of like what you do, I think, when you're a criminal. It's like you don't really admit the truth. You just lie your ass off and you lie your way out of it.
That's the way to make it, I guess.
That's how you make it. So Pablo sends Blackie, I guess, to check up on his family. And he doesn't see them, but he pretends as though he sees them. And, you know, it's like, oh, yeah, you know, I see your little girl, and she smiled. And it's kind of emotional because they both know, okay, you're just blowing smoke. But at the same time, it was what I think Pablo needed to hear to really, like, get his bearings and make sure his family was okay. In that process, he's captured. He doesn't give up Pablo, but he gives up La Quica. And La Quica, of course, you know, he tries his best to get out of the situation, but he ends up jumping ship as well. And
expected.
Yeah, and tries, expected. So now we're seeing the people who are really, really close to them, who are really influential into his organization, being taken down left and right. And right before this whole plan to go and attack Los Pepes at Monte Casino happens, they intercept La Quica. La Quica basically tries to help the DEA capture Pablo. But of course, Pablo just has that sixth sense. He knows what's up, and he knows that La Quica has turned.
Right. No, I have a question about that. Because for a second, I was wondering if maybe Quica gave him, like, some kind of code or something when he was on the phone, like, to hint. But I guess Pablo is he can just tell. I don't know.
I think he can just tell.
He can just tell because probably he could tell by the tone of his voice and all of that. Because I was wondering, man, like if La Quica could pull this off and just like give him a little hint, but still make it seem to the DEA like he was cooperating. But who knows?
I mean, that could very well be the case.
Because he was just like, where are you? Are you with Limon?
Well, I think at that point he was kind of suspected that he had flipped on him. But I think that La Quica had pretty much made up his mind. Like when he killed the other two henchmen and then tried to take the money, like he had pretty much decided, okay. And you could tell before he left when Pablo, he gave that speech like, rah, rah, we're going to go out there, we're going to kill him until our last dying breath. I think you could tell he was kind of like, okay, I'm out. So
yeah, and he even asked, what do you think our chances are of surviving? Like, he was ready to bounce. He was ready to get to the US of A and get out of there. So, man, I just think, he was so fragile.
Yeah. I think, too, at that point, you kind of have to just go all in or be all out. Because if you seem like you're kind of in the middle, like, oh, no, I was trying to help you. Oh, no, I was actually trying to help the DEA.
Done. Either way.
And he knows that Los Pepes are after them. Their entire organization has dwindled down at this point, before La Quica gives him up, to like maybe 6 or 7 people, if that. So the manpower isn't there anymore. They don't have enough manpower to protect themselves from Los Pepes, let alone the Colombian government. Right. So I think asylum or being taken to America was pretty much the best bet that he could have. So I think maybe there's that a little bit maybe in the back of his mind where he was like, okay, well, I'll try and warn him. But at the same time, I think he really wanted that ticket to America. So Pablo ends up smelling the scent.
He did.
And he basically, you know, thwarts them like he does in pretty much every situation that's like this when they think they're close.
Right.
And then they just kind of go in, I guess, out of anger and just sort of shoot up Los Pepes anyways, which I thought,
whatever.
This is random. Like,
I know. I guess, man, chasing someone for so long and being so close for so long must be frustrating. But at what point? I mean, I think it was one of these episodes where Connie was speaking to Murphy, and she was just like, just make sure you're still yourself at the end of this.
Yes.
I mean,
So
how can they stay the same, you know?
Yeah, you can't.
This
honestly.
definitely changed them. Even with just Murphy and Peña specifically, and even narrowing that down to Murphy, you got this guy, it just seems like a good guy, good heart, just wants justice. And now he's gone after Pablo, who's so ruthless and who's caused them to do horrible things in their pursuit of him.
Yeah.
How can you be the same person?
You can't. I mean, you think about it, this has been their entire lives for the latter, I mean, at least like 7-8 years. This is just people who have dedicated their entire lives, like moved to a completely different part of the world to find this man. And I read an interview with the real Javier, Peña, and Steve Murphy, and they, you know, they talk about those moments where they were so close, where the coffee cups were still steaming, like
So close.
they were just, you know, it was like minutes, like not even maybe a minute that they were behind them. So, you know, having those experiences time and time again over the course of pretty much a decade, it can turn you into, and then seeing, you know, a lot of the devastation, seeing a lot of the violence, seeing how so many people are not playing by the rules, it makes you wonder, like, okay,
right.
is
By
there a
any
moral
means,
code by
yeah.
any means, you know? So we end now with Pablo and Limon, just these two dudes by themselves. Really, really great imagery. I thought just the two of them kind of going off into the distance, leaving Medellín, not really knowing what's going to happen with them.
Right.
Like, just really surprised at, you know, the fact that they were even able to make it out at this point. And then just kind of feeling really sorry for Pablo, you know?
Right. I think up until this point, well, obviously a little bit before this, but he would just pride himself on how many people were on his side. And he kind of used that as leverage against the government even, you know, all these people are with me, all these people are protecting me, what are you going to do? And at this point, like you mentioned, his men are dwindling down.
Yeah.
He's got Limon.
That's it.
You know, like what
Limon, the
what
ride
a
or die.
difference.
Yeah, from season 1, the plata o plomo. That was his power.
Yeah.
Like, you make the decision, because that's how much power I have in this country. You only have one bodyguard.
Yep.
That's it. If a shootout happens, if something goes down, it's just the two of you.
Yeah.
And, you know, from our history books, we know that that's exactly how it happened. Limon was actually the one who was with Pablo during that final shootout. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next episodes, coming episodes, but just any final thoughts about episodes 7 and 8?
No, overall, I just want to say they did a brilliant job in showing the transformation.
Yes.
From when we were first introduced to this empire that Pablo built, and now seeing it in shambles and seeing him struggle and scramble. Man, it's very intense, but I love how they're showing the whole process.
True. And not just the external transformation, but we're also seeing physical transformation with Pablo as well. He's almost like
he's fainting and very it's definitely taking a toll on his health,
body
and his
health,
mind,
and his whole physical appearance. So, all right, let's get into some predictions then.
Okay.
Okay.
AfterBuzz TV predictions.
All right.
Wow.
Oh, no flashy lights? Oh, okay. I
That's
guess
all right.
We're moving. Yeah. We'll do our own people here at home. So
man.
Yes. Any predictions for you?
I would like to say that we'll see Maritza again for some reason.
Okay.
Maybe just because Limon's still alive. Maybe she'll come into play. Not quite sure. As far as anything else goes, it's just a matter of time for Pablo and Limon. I think they're just racing against the clock, just trying to survive. I don't think he has a solid plan. I think they're just trying to avoid the government and Los Pepes, and that's all they can do at this point. I think they've hit their limit. So we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see how they wrap it up next week.
Well, I have already finished. I could not help myself. It was just so good.
Too addicting,
Too
right?
addicting. The darn Netflix struggle is real. So I guess my predictions will just be more for season 3.
Yeah.
We've been focusing this season partly on the Cali cartel. And so we know that that's where they're going to focus for season 3 at least. It'll be bittersweet to kind of see the Pablo Escobar story kind of go away, but I think it'll be nice to see how, the drug cartel is still booming, it's still thriving, and I'm hoping that we'll go into the U.S. and see places like Miami and New York that were really affected by the drug trade during that time, and maybe even see some more of the stories that we were talking about earlier in this episode of just everyday normal civilians, people who have been affected by this directly, indirectly, and just hearing those stories about how this entire empire just caused so much devastation and violence and destruction amongst people who, in normal circumstances, would have never even been in those situations. So. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap up for episode 7 and 8. Miaira, where can the people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Miaira Jennings and youtube.com/Miaira Jennings TV. Thanks, guys.
All right, and you guys can check me out Instagram, Twitter, Ashley_Chatman. Thank you so much for joining us. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel, and if you are on iTunes, leave us a review. And we'll see you guys next week for the final 2 episodes of season 2 of Narcos. See you next time. See ya.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
See you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.